the Belgians. That is not to say that there were no African populations with over 450 nationalities. And we will also remember that it's the same King Leopold of the Belgians who was the first behind the Berlin Conference in 1884 and 1885, during which the current boundaries that we know of African states were established. But during that same period that Leopold was establishing the Congo Free State, the Germans under Bismarck in 1880 had also established a presence in what is present-day Tanzania, but was then Tanganyika, and in what was then Rwanda-Urundi, which we now know separately as Rwanda and Burundi. When the Germans lost the war, what is normally described as the First World War, but I prefer to call the First European Tribal War, what then happened is that Rwanda and Burundi were made to be trust territories of Belgium. So the original sin in terms of the conflict that we see in DRC today was planted in those days, planted by King Leopold of the Belgians, reinforced in Berlin in 1884 and 1885. And there is a beautiful book that has been written by the Nigeria called Dekeye Adebajo in 2010, which is titled The Curse of Berlin, Africa After the Cold War. And it is important to have that history for us to appreciate what is now known as the conflict that is pitting Congo. Some say that the Rwandese are involved because the people that are fighting as M23 are of Tutsi stock, but they are Congolese. They come from around Kivu. The fact that a boundary was drawn by the colonialists and put them in a country that is now known as DRC, at one time was known as Zaire or Congo Kinshasa, does not make them Rwandese. So the M23 was formed deliberately because the people who are then christened as the Banyamulenge thought that they were being discriminated against. They thought that the Congolese administration in Kinshasa was telling them to go to Rwanda, which is not their country. And this is something that has been debated over time. In 1996, when the country was still known as Zaire, the former president of Tanzania, the late Julius Kambarage Nyerere, in 1996, when delivering a speech in New York under the Peace Africa, the Peace Academy, said that we must be very clear that the Banyamulenge are not Rwandese. The Banyamulenge or the Tutsi who are to be found or who are found in Kivu are Congolese. Because the colonialist border put them in DRC, Congo, and some in Tutsi, does not make them Rwandese. So the M23 was created deliberately for the purpose of protecting the interests of the Tutsis who are Congolese citizens.
Tunawasalimia wa ndugu wote tena wasikilizaji. Kama tunafanya hii video ni kupenda kumuonesha kwamba wandugu wenye kujiita wapo wa panafricaniste wanadanganya wa Afrika. Hakuna mtu mwenye alisahau gisi huyu kijana wa Kenya wenye kuita Lumumba alikuwa anapita kuma video kuma shene kuongea bitu ya mubaya. Anapenda kubadilisha histoire. Anapenda kuongea bitu yenye aina. Dunia inajua bitu yote na bitu yote ko sawa kawaida. Mfano ni kusema wakati wa Afrika walikuya huku Amerika, walikuya sawa vile wa esclave na wengine walikuya sawa vile watu wakimbizi. Wote wanajulikana. Ni vile vile pia wakati wa ndugu wenye kutoka Rwanda haiko tu Wanyarwanda wenyewe, wandugu wengi wanatoka mumainchi mingi ya Afrika wanakuya pale Kongo, sawa vile kukia immigration. Wamoya ni Wanyarwanda wenye kujiita Wanyamurenge. Yeye alikuwa anaongea kusema Wanyamurenge walikuwa tangu zamani Mkongo, ni vile njo walikuwa wakati wanafanya separation usate ugabuzi ya Kongo, kipande mwaya yabo ikaingia Mkongo. Alafu ilo sio ukweli. Ukweli unajulikana na mpaka leo gisi niko naongea na wewe, ukweli yote iko, mavideo yote iko gisi waliwaingizaka, wanakuya wanakimbia vita kwa Rwanda. Sasa uzuri wa Kongo ikawapa fashi pale kwenye wanaita Minembwe. Minembwe iko Mufizi. Na ile Mulenge ni kilima yenye kufatikana mu territoire ya Uvira. Haiko yabo, ni mlima yenye ilikuwa pale masiku yote wakati wanawapatia hayo. Ile ni ukweli, upende usipopenda ndio ukweli ile. Lakini kwa kijana alikuwa aona Wakongomani sawa vile ni watu wabaya, kama watu wanaongea ukweli. Sasa leo anabadilisha masemi yake ya kusema ya kwamba Rwanda iliwadanganya, iliwaambia kwamba M23 wanapigania ile kitu ya ukweli yao, wanapigania kutafuta kuwapatia citoyenneté ya Mkongo, citizenship. Lakini leo anakia kuona dunia inaonyesha kwamba Rwanda njo ilikuwa inapigana, hapana M23. Leo sasa ndio anaongea vile, ndio anasikia Tanzania ndio inaongea. Alafu wakati Kongo iko nawaambia wandugu wa Afrika walicheza, walizania muzaa. Wanazani Kongo haitabadilika. Kongo haitabadilika na hakuna mwenye atabadilisha. Mtu wote mwenye anakuya Mkongo atasuivre udongo, atasuivre watoto wa Kongo gisi wanaongea. Upande usipopanda ile njoo iko. Sikilizani huyu kijana.
Foreign assets control did something that was once unthinkable. They did not just sanction a rogue commander or a specific unit of the Rwanda Defense Force. No, they aimed the financial guillotine at the entire institution. Every soldier, every officer, and every asset of the RDF is now a target of the American financial empire. For 3 decades, the Rwanda Defense Force was the darling of the Pentagon. They were trained, equipped, and shielded by Washington. They were the regional enforcers, the boots on the ground that allowed the West to maintain a grip on Central Africa without getting their own hands dirty. But today, those same trainers have become the executioners. Why? Because in the world of imperial geopolitics, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests. Paul Kagame, a man who once sat at the high tables of Davos and the White House, has discovered that his lease has expired. The United States has explicitly demanded the immediate withdrawal of the Rwanda Defense Force from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Not a gradual retreat, not a negotiated exit, but an immediate disappearance from the sovereign soil of the DRC. The Treasury Secretary himself stood before the world and declared that Rwanda's military weapons and equipment must be gone. This is not the language of diplomacy. This is the language of a master speaking to a servant who has dared to overstep his boundaries. Think about the implications of these United States sanctions. It means that any bank anywhere in the world that touches a single dollar related to the RDF is now risking its own life. It means the military aid is evaporated. The training programs are finished. The intelligence sharing is dead. The very military machine that Washington helped build is now being suffocated by the same hand that fed it. The mainstream media wants you to believe this is about the M23 rebels. They want you to believe that America has suddenly developed a heart for the suffering Congolese people. Do not be so naive. The M23 rebels have been a front for the Rwanda Defense Force for years. The United Nations has published report after report detailing how Rwanda trains, recruits, and leads these so-called rebels inside the DRC. For 20 years, these reports sat on the desks of the State Department, gathering dust. For 20 years, the executions, the rapes, and the displacement of millions were treated as mere collateral damage. The truth, my brothers and sisters, is that the Rwanda Defense Force has been sanctioned not because they are killers, but because they have become inconvenient. The US Treasury admitted that the RDF has introduced advanced GPS jamming systems, drones, and heavy hardware into the Congolese battlefield. They are no longer just a small proxy, they have grown into a